Hello and welcome back to the Golazo podcast. And having previously taken a closer look at all things Argentine in the Premier League and then dipping back into the national team after the recent international break, we are back to Europe and focusing on Spain this week. The home to some of the biggest names in Argentine football. We're going to talk Messi and Simeone and discuss whether they will achieve their goals this season. We'll take a look at a number of the players on the fringes of Lionel Scaloni's squad and perhaps take a little walk down memory lane with some of our favourite Argentine La Liga players. For that and more, I'm joined as ever by Tom Robinson. How are you doing?
Yeah, good, Peter. I'm looking forward to discussing the myriad of Argentinian players that are plying their trade in La Liga and have done in the past. And other than that, just counting down the days until I'm next out in Argentina in just under a month. So yeah, looking forward to that as well.
Excellent. As is the country that awaits you, Tom, as of course. And we are delighted to be joined by Spanish football expert and author of Eibar the Brave and Hijacking Laliga, Mr. Euan McTeer. Thanks very much for joining us, Euan.
No problem. How are you doing, guys?
Excellent. Well, when talking Liga from an Argentine perspective, there is perhaps one place to start. And given his record 6th FIFA Best Player of the Year award earlier in this week, and then another injury scare, we'll begin with Lionel Messi. We'll go back to the start of the week when he did pick up that the best, as it's stupidly called, award. And of course, that sparked a huge amount of conversation. Euan, I'll come to you first as someone who watched a great deal of Messi last season for Barcelona. A lot of people questioning his winning of that award, but when you look at 54 goals, 20 assists all season and winning La Liga, winning the European Golden Shoe, where did you stand on that?
Yeah, I mean, he's the best, so he should probably win the award of the same name. I mean, it's an individual award and it's a season-long award, or when it comes to the Ballon d'Or, it's a year-long award. So I always say, who was the best player in that year? You see some people saying, oh, Ronaldo should win because he broke this record, this milestone in that year. Yeah, most of that milestone was done in previous years. Van Dijk won a trophy with Liverpool, won the Champions League with them. He was great. He was really superb. He changed a lot for them. But just because he won that trophy doesn't mean that he's necessarily the best player. The best player in the world, I think, in the last season was Messi. And if Barcelona hadn't had him, they wouldn't have come even close to winning the Champions League, and they certainly wouldn't have won La Liga so convincingly for the second year in a row.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the numbers as well, it's the sort of numbers where if anyone else was able to do that, people would have been talking about it for a lot more. But Messi has set a bar a lot higher from just the consistency that he manages to do it. We saw him come back from injury this week and then go off at half time. And it kind of brought back into question one of the sort of aspects of him playing for Argentina, which is that dependence. And Argentina, obviously, for many years have been talking about Messi dependence. And now increasingly, we're seeing that at Barcelona. I mean, how much is the dependence an issue for Ernesto Valverde, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard when you've got a player of that caliber, and just, the stats speak for themselves, and anyone who's watched him over the years where he's just made the incredible ordinary on a level that we've never really seen before, it's inevitable that you're going to have a certain dependence on a player who's that brilliant. But let's be honest, Barcelona have strengthened. The addition of Griezmann's big as well in terms of freshening up that forward line. Frenkie de Jong coming in as well. I think there is hopefully some signs that in the future they're kind of shifting away from it, but it's not going to be something that just happens overnight. And we've seen them sort of struggle to begin with it this season. I think I'm sure that the Neymar transfer saga that's sort of rumbled on over the summer probably hasn't helped the preparation and the mood in the camp. Again, Euan will know far more than I do on that. But it's a question that many managers have struggled to answer, particularly Argentinian coaches. And at the end of the day, you've got to play to your strengths, and having Messi in your squad is always going to improve you. I mean, what do you think this kind of the vibe around the Barcelona squad after the summer and the kind of current situations and Messi's long-term future there, Euan?
Yeah, it's not a particularly happy environment at the moment, and Messi gave an interview a few weeks ago with Sport, and some of the comments were seen to be not critical of the club, but suggesting he wasn't fully happy. But then at the same time, I think it was Ernesto Valverde himself who said, because he's such a superstar, we fall into the trap of over analysing every single literal word he says, every single piece of body language. You'll know this even more, I'm sure, from when he's playing for Argentina. The focus on everything he says or does, every little fidget he has during an interview is so intense because he gives so few of them. So I think that maybe too much was read into that. But Messi is happy at Barcelona. He always has been. I'm sure he always will be. It's where he grew up. It's where he's happy, where he's comfortable. I can't ever see him leaving Barcelona unless it's to go back to Argentina, to Newell's or something like that. But he'll be at Barcelona for the next season. There is talk that he could leave after each season. He has a clause in his contract that he could decide to depart unilaterally, but I don't think he'll be doing that anytime soon. The problem with Messi right now is just, as you mentioned, the injuries. And when Messi gets older and older, the talk of Messi declining comes up, but I don't really think we're ever actually going to see a Messi decline. I think he'll retire before that. But what I think we will see is in certain seasons, we'll see him play 5 fewer games one season, then 10 fewer games, then 15 fewer games. I think the injuries is what's going to catch up with him, not any drop-off in quality.
Yeah, and as I said, we did obviously see him pick up another slight injury when he started this week. I mean, how much of a concern is that going forward for this season for Barcelona? I mean, they're looking at trying to defend a Liga crown, going for the Champions League after that defeat to Liverpool last season. I mean, is the Champions League a realistic target for this Barcelona side, do you think?
That'll always be their target. It's a realistic one, I think, because the Champions League, I mean, the talent in Europe, I think, right now is spread over so many more teams than it was just a few years ago. So it's almost a 8-sided coin flip when it comes to deciding who's going to win it, because you only need to perform well on 2 or 3 nights in spring. So who knows what state Barcelona will be in next spring? Who knows what state Messi will be in? But having Messi is obviously, of course, absolutely vital for him to be there, because he's everything about Barcelona. It's not just when he's not there you lose the quality. When he's not there, you lose your tactics. You lose your way of playing, because Barcelona's way of playing is built around Messi. So it's not just the talent you lose when he's not there. Nobody else knows how to execute that role. Even players of almost similar quality like Griezmann or Neymar in the past, they just don't play in that same way. So yeah, they need him to be fit in time for the Champions League, and they need him to be fit now if they're going to make up ground in La Liga.
And I think that's important as well in terms of just how much more of a vocal leader he seems to have become, both for the national team and Barcelona. We've seen him give some quite rousing speeches in the last year or two for Barcelona, and I think it was it the Gamper Trophy last year when he really said that he was putting a lot of emphasis on winning the big one, the European Cup. So I do feel like that's going to be something that's kind of bugging him, because they've dominated the league over the last 10 years or so. It's really kind of, I think, something that he's aiming for. That's definitely the impression that I get. And whether Barcelona are well equipped to get over the kind of mental blocks that they've had in the knockout phases in the last couple of years, is going to be interesting. But I feel like that's the big one for Barcelona this year, and I guess we'll see if Messi can get his hands on it one more time.
It's interesting you say there, Euan, of how Barcelona are built around Messi playing. With Argentina, we've had that as well for a number of years, and it's been interesting this period as we've seen him suspended or he was injured as well. But Argentina trying to find a system without Messi, and we were talking in the previous podcast how they then fit him back in when he comes back in. Tom, do you think it's been a positive this period for Argentina to work without Messi?
Yeah, I mean they're pretty much fairly meaningless friendlies in the grand scheme of things. So the fact that Scaloni doesn't have the pressure of having to play Messi. I think it's a good way of building for a life after him, because again, if injuries are taking their toll, certainly the number of matches for the national team, particularly when there's a lot of travel involved, you think would also be scaled back just to prolong his club career that little bit longer. As much as, you know, as we saw with the Argentina leg, America, he's a big draw, and I think the national team will want to try and get him out as much as possible. But in terms of a free hit for Scaloni to start experimenting without the pressure of having to play him, then I think that's a positive. However, the fact of the matter is they're still obviously going to play Messi in the big tournaments, because he's the best player in the world, and maybe it is a missed opportunity to find a system that works around him. So it's all well and good having this plan for with the games you don't have Messi, but I still think there's work to go in just getting the very best out of him. I don't know what you think about that, Peter.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, they certainly haven't seen the best of him, and I think it has been positive that Scaloni's been able to work with this group. There's the question mark of then when Messi comes in, how that works, as always. But I think it will be, or at least as we said on the last podcast, there's sort of a shoots of optimism from the group that's coming through, and you certainly can't see it as anything other than a positive when you do put Messi back into the mix there. When we talk about Messi's future, not just for the national team, but from an Argentine perspective, you mentioned something earlier about what may come after Barcelona, and we had a couple of questions come in, one from Rowan van Benten and the other one from Rag RK, who both asked along the similar lines, what is your take on Messi's desire to play for Newell's, and do you foresee Messi playing at least a season for Newell's while he's still playing for the national team? I'll come to you first, Euan.
I think it's just so hard to predict, because these players that are at such a superstar level don't follow the normal career path, do they? They don't play for the big team, then maybe stay in the same league but at a smaller team, then maybe go back to their home country or maybe go to MLS. No. These players at this stratosphere have a completely unpredictable career path, because they can do whatever they want. Their legacy is assured. Their money is assured. I mean, look at like Michael Jordan, the way he retired and then came back in the NBA, things like this. Because he was just at such a different level, you couldn't just see him following the same career path as everyone else. He could do exactly what he wanted, plan it exactly as he wanted. So it's hard to predict when Messi will want to go. He might want to go while he's still really good, go back to Argentina. He might want to wait and go after the first kind of year of decline, similar to what Iniesta did when he went to Japan after probably his first bad season at Barcelona. So with Messi, you don't know what's going to happen in terms of will he still be playing for the Argentine team at the time. I mean, again, that's another one, because he could be good enough, but he might have retired from international football then. It's just so hard to predict, because a player like him can basically dictate how he wants to end his story, what he wants to write for his final chapter. He's earned the right to decide it himself.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think because he's at that such a high level, you often get players who've been, really at the top level, when they do take a step down to maybe the lower leagues or lower quality of league, like the Argentinian Superliga, it's almost difficult then for them to sort of deal with playing at that, that's such a lower level. So there's part of me that thinks that if he does give it a go, it will be for quite a short period of time, because I think we've seen him get frustrated with the way that the AFA works and the national team set up at times, and I think a lot of that will be replicated in the Superliga if he does ever play. I think he'll just be frustrated by players not on the same wavelength around him. There's a lot of, hard running and sort of midfield battles that don't necessarily have the same quality as you'd get in Europe. And I don't think it would necessarily suit his game. But having said all that, I think there's almost a sort of a societal pressure, or that kind of nagging thing in the back of his mind. It's like, I've never actually played in Argentina. I kind of want to, because after years of kind of always being accused of not being truly Argentinian, which is absolutely bullshit, but the fact that he's had these questions, which I think he's won round 99% of the public. I think there'll always be that, no, but you have to play at least a season back in Newell's, even if it is just a token gesture and he kind of is 38 or something like that and is just playing in a kind of midfield role where he doesn't do much running and just pings balls around. I think it has to happen purely for his public image, if anything. But I think the realities of it will soon dawn on him, that the rose tinted aspect of it will quickly fade. And yeah, if it does happen, I can't see it lasting for long, unfortunately. And a lot of it might even be the state that Newell's are in. They've been up and down a fair bit. They're doing very well in the Super League right now, but they are also scrapping a relegation battle at the same time. So a lot of it could be also dependent on what the club hierarchy is looking like, who they've got in charge. Is there enough money behind them to actually fund a bit of a, Messi swan song super team at the end of his career? It's going to be interesting for sure.
Yeah, I think whether you support Newell's or not, it's what everyone would love to see at some point before he hangs up his boots, even if it was just for a very short period. But it would be such a fitting end to see Messi in that Newell's shirt. So hopefully we will get to see that. As the second part of that question, I'm not sure we'd see it when he was also playing for the national team, because I suspect it would come almost just as he was about to retire. So I can't imagine that's going to be within the next couple of years. But as Euan said, who knows? We'll move on from Messi to perhaps the second most famous Argentine in La Liga, and someone, Euan, you've written extensively about, Diego Simeone. While we talk about the struggles Barca are having, and Real Madrid likewise, are we looking at potentially the best opportunity for Atletico Madrid to get their hands back on La Liga title?
It might be, yeah, but at the same time, they might have already sort of blown it. Real Madrid and Barcelona have not started that well, but you look at the table right now, and it's Real Madrid who's top, not Atletico. They've already dropped points at home to Celta Vigo, lost away at Real Sociedad. So, yeah, it's a good opportunity because Real Madrid and Barcelona are not as strong as they have been in the past few years. This is very similar, I think, to the 2013-14 season, where a lower kind of points total could win you the league. As much as Atletico won the league and they were fantastic that season, we have to remember it was helped in part by one of the lowest points totals posted for a champion in the last decade or so. There was no 100-point league, far from it. So Atletico Madrid do have a chance, but it's a difficult season as well, because it's a good opportunity because their rivals have slackened off, but at the same time Atletico are going through a massive transition, the biggest one since Simeone has been at the club. They obviously lost so many talented players in the summer: Griezmann, Lucas Hernandez, Diego Godin, Juan Fran, Felipe Luis, Rodri. All these guys are gone. They've replaced quite well, in my opinion, but they've replaced mostly with young players, and that's going to take some time for them to bed in. So Simeone, I think, has done a great job. Pre-season, by all accounts, this year was one of the best pre-seasons they've put together in a long time. With the fitness coach, Profe Ortega, the Uruguayan, he worked them really hard, got the players in shape in the way that they weren't last year. There haven't been as many injuries so far. Simeone and Herman Burgos got the players really up to speed. Burgos, who speaks English much better than Simeone, he was basically working with Kieran Trippier one-on-one when he first arrived. The first day he had a session, Herman Burgos was there alongside Trippier, walking them through all the steps, and they basically had him ready to go in match day one, even though he'd been one of the later summer signings. So they did a lot of really good work, I think, in the summer. Started well with 3 wins, which is good considering how much turmoil there's been in the squad. Now we just have to see if they can pick it up and win consistently away from home.
And another thing I wanted to ask about Simeone's Atletico Madrid is, obviously he's been synonymous with a certain style of football which has been hugely successful, that rock solid defence and hard working team. Do you think that he's capable of creating a new style with the likes of Joao Felix, Renan Lodi, some of these more exciting attacking players, or do you think he's going to revert to type with a style?
I think he is. When I wrote the book, obviously you're writing a book about how Atletico Madrid had success. You have to have a Simeone chapter. In fact, the whole book could be a Simeone chapter because that was probably the main reason. And I went back and really looked at his first sort of steps in Argentina when he basically went from one day to the next being a player and then a coach. And some of his teams in Argentina were quite attacking. He has said, because when you look at the managers he's worked under so many managers, and attacking ones, defensive ones, and he's taken a little bit from all of them. And he spoke about in his early days, he took a lot of stuff from Marcelo Bielsa. And anyone who hasn't seen Simeone's career all the way through would be thinking, Bielsa football, that's nothing like it. But Simeone has always said he'll put whatever tactics he needs for the players he has and put that in place to win. And at Argentina, he had some really defensive teams sometimes with, 6 clean sheets in a row here, another 5 in a row there. And sometimes he had really attacking teams who would win 4-3, 3-2. So he just goes based on what players he has available to him. And at Atletico, when he first came in, he had really, really good defenders. I mean, you think about the guys like Juanfran, Diego Godin, some of the defenders he had there, Miranda. These guys were there when he arrived. He arrived at a team with great defenders and not too much in the way of attacking. He had to bring those players in. So he made a defensive team. And then after a while, it's maybe been hard to get out of that mould, if you know what I mean. You get used to one way of playing, you start to sign for that way of playing, and it's hard to change. But if he were to go and manage a really attack-minded team tomorrow, I'm sure he could come up with something because he's a flexible coach. It just so happens that Atletico, for them, it really suits a 4-4-2 kind of defensive-minded first sort of formation.
Yeah, I mean, if he were to win the league or the Champions League, do you think that could be the moment for Simeone to sign off at Atletico?
I almost feel like the moment's passed. There was a point where a couple of years ago he had his contract and he reduced the length of his contract by 2 years to bring the end date to basically within 18 months of that time. And that was sort of seen as a sort of way of him saying, okay, I'm not going to stay for 4 more years, but I will give you at least 18 months. But then he renewed it again and bumped it back up. So I almost feel like the time has passed, and the job he's always been linked with, if he were to leave, is Inter. And right now you've got Antonio Conte has just come into Inter. That seems like a long-term project. With Conte, you can never quite know when he'll throw the toys out the pram and walk off. But I'd give it a couple of years anyway. So I think for Simeone, he's at Atletico. He's committed to them. He's overseen the move into the new stadium. I think he's seen just how the club is on and up and up and up, and he's loved there. He loves it, and I just don't think he wants to leave. I don't see him at another club, maybe Inter, and Atletico Madrid is everything to him now. I think he really knows that he can be there sort of Sir Alex Ferguson. The only job apart from Inter that he could leave for would be the Argentine team, but again, I think that would be when he's a lot older and when he's ready to take something that's like a little bit less stressful. Although I don't know if you could say that, but when you see the way he is in the touchline every single 3 or 4 days, it would be nice, I think, for him to have. It would be good for his heart, I think, for him to only have a dozen games a year.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to come to that possibility to you, Tom. I mean, we spoke about it when we were talking about the Premier League and Pochettino. So we'll ask the same with Simeone. Do you see that happening, Simeone with the national team?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think it will happen at some point, but like Euan said, I think he's still got a long way before he's going to feel like he needs to not necessarily resort to that, because I'm sure he'd absolutely love to take that job, but he's in a great place. He's a perfect fit for Atletico Madrid. They're one and the same these days, and I'm sure he'd like to maybe challenge him with something different. Maybe a stint in Serie A. Who knows? Maybe even a go in England. But I think the national team job is assured for him at some point in the future. So he's going to be in the driving seat, whether he wants to take that or not. Maybe you could see him in a situation where he'd come to their rescue again. But I think, like Pochettino, he's a long way off. I'd say maybe he is a little bit closer to it than Pochettino. I feel like because he's achieved so much at Atletico Madrid, winning the league, getting to Champions League finals, going deep in the competition on a regular basis, that perhaps he's at a stage where he'd sort of be ready to try something different. Whereas Pochettino, you get the feeling he's still on not that Simeone's not on an upward trajectory, but he's very much already at that top table. Pochettino, you feel like he's got a big move in him, and he's not going to even consider the Argentinian job until he's got, one of those real European elites. So I'd say maybe Simeone more likely to be than Pochettino, but still very, very little chance of it happening in the next 5 years or so, I'd say.
Yeah, so good news for Lionel Scaloni that neither of those two perhaps will be available. But still on the subject of Atletico, over the years under Simeone, we've seen a lot of Argentinian players there with varying amounts of success. I think now Angel Correa is the only one still there, and even he was linked with a big move to AC Milan during the previous window that some huge figures suggested. Euan, what did you make of that transfer and sort of Correa's role in the Atletico squad now?
Yeah, it was a bit messy, and I don't think there was really a need for him to have to leave. I think if he'd stayed, he would have had minutes, and Simeone really likes him, and he would have had a role in the squad. He's their super sub, really. He's the guy they turn to in the 60th minute when it's still 0-0, which happens quite a lot, to be honest. But the fact that he was so close to moving and then has stayed and kind of missed pre-season, it didn't help as well, the fact that he was suspended for the first game, then he was injured, then he was sick. So he didn't have a good start to the season, and he's almost been left behind because other guys have come in and played really well. Vitolo, who Correa was ahead of in the pecking order in that position at the start of the season, played those first few weeks and played really well. So he's moved ahead of Correa. Other players as well who've come in the summer have had the chance to impress when Correa has been absent or been focused on the transfer. So I think he didn't have to leave, but once he started making the moves towards leaving, I think it would have been better for him if he had, because to then go back, it's sort of like going back to your ex a little bit once you've already sort of half moved away. So he's in a sticky situation there, but at least he does have an ally in the coaching staff because they really like him, and I think over time he can work his way back in. But he does have to win over some of the fans because some of them weren't too happy with the way, not that he acted terribly, but just the fact he wanted away at all in the summer and then decided to stay because it didn't come off.
Yeah, I mean, despite not having a great start to the season, there has been talk about him possibly being recalled to Scaloni's squad. Tom, I mean, are you happy to see him back in the squad? I mean, Ronnie sent in a question on Correa saying, do you think it's better that he left? Do you think it's better that he leaves Atletico? So you can field the two at the same time, I suppose.
Yeah, sure thing. I'll multitask for you there, Peter. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I like Angel Correa. I've always liked him ever since his days in San Lorenzo. I thought he was different. He always showed that kind of elite mentality and had something really versatile about him in the final third. And maybe I'm being a bit harsh, but it feels like he hasn't really kicked on to the next level that I was maybe expecting, because he really seemed like one of those generational talents that were going to be a big part of the national team and having a big career in Europe going forward. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's at Atletico Madrid, he's getting linked to some really big clubs as well, so it's not like he's doing badly at all, but perhaps we could have seen a little bit more from him, but I think he's a really good fit for the national team, certainly in this new younger iteration. He's, as I said, versatile. He's someone who I think could complement the other forward players, but also he's got that work ethic and discipline that's been instilled into him by Simeone, which I think is necessary for an Argentina side that's still, finding its feet and not the all-conquering machine that it has been in the past. So yeah, I think he's someone who should definitely always be sort of in and around that squad, and I'd have him in more often than not, because he can bring something to the table. But we'll have to wait and see if he can take his chance and if there's going to be a system that fits him in. Because realistically, depending on what formation Argentina look to play, he's not in the top three forwards right now, so he's going to have to make do with being a bench player and trying to make an impact off the bench. Certainly the likes of Dybala not really taking their chance. There's room for him to maybe sneak in there.
Yeah, I think the fact that he can play a couple of different roles does make him very useful to the squad. I think at best he's going to have to make do with that kind of squad role, which he had to do at club level as well. But certainly opportunities for him to do that. Someone else who was in the last squad and had to withdraw from injury was Lucas Ocampos, who obviously moved to La Liga in the previous windows, now at Sevilla, along with Eva Banega and Franco Vasquez, who were relatively recently involved in the national team. Are you happy to see Ocampos make that move, Tom? And do you think he could get regularly into the squad?
Yeah, I'm really interested to see how he does, because I remember seeing him for the under-17s back in 2011, and there was something about him that just made him stand out from the rest. He had almost like a Cristiano Ronaldo-esque gait and style to him, and he was very direct. He was really impressive, and and then he had that breakthrough season for River in the second division, sold to France, that same window that Dybala also went from the second division to Palermo as well, and yeah, he looked one of Argentina's better players as a young under 17. This is in the same sort of team as Leandro Paredes, Martin Benitez. He's playing against Sterling and Pickford at the under 20 World Cup, and Marquinhos in the Brazil side. But just looking at the Brazil side, you can see a few players who didn't kick on, like Lucas Piazon and Adrian. So it was looking for a while that maybe he was going to go down that route of fading into nothingness. But I'm not going to lie, I didn't see a lot of him in France, but obviously doing enough to get a sizable fee for Sevilla, and certainly he seems like he's made a bit of an impact since he's been there. I mean, what's the feeling in Spain and Sevilla, Euan?
Yeah, I think a lot of people like me, when he came, had pretty much never seen him play before in our lives, to be honest. We're not watching a lot of French football, and I'd never seen him play until he came to Sevilla. But you heard that Monchi really liked him. They paid a fee, so you think, okay, maybe this guy can do something. And he's been amazing. He's probably been Sevilla's best forward so far this season, and considering some of the players they have there, that's saying something. The first game of the season he played an hour or so and came off, and since then he's played the full 90 minutes every game apart from one game when he was out injured. In this midweek he scored a goal and assisted against Eibar, although they ended up losing that game. But he's been perfect, and I think under Julian Lopetegui he can maybe develop even more, because Lopetegui is the kind of coach that is hands-on and helps players get better. Lopetegui has his critics for how things went at Spain and Real Madrid, but you speak to any of the players and they always talk about how well they were coached by him when they were working for him. So I think Lopetegui can be a hands-on kind of guy to get Ocampos performing in different tactical systems, performing better and scoring more goals and participating more. And yeah, I think his start to life at Sevilla it couldn't have been better, really.
Yeah, and it's easy to forget that he's still actually only 25, because as you mentioned, Tom, that youth career and the fact that he came from River with quite a lot of hype around him sort of does make you think he's been around for a lot longer than he actually has. So there's quite a good window there for Argentina to get quite a lot out of Ocampos if they could find a position for him. I think inconsistency was one of the things that seems to have been levelled at him a lot of the time since moving to Europe, and I think before making the move to Sevilla, it seemed a lot of Marseille fans have been won over by the fact that he started to, show a lot of hard work as well. So promising signs there. Do you think Banega and Vasquez could force their way back in, seeing as they're two of the sort of older players that now look as though their chances are decreasing now?
Yeah, as you say, older players that aren't getting as many minutes maybe, but with Banega again, part of the reason he hasn't had minutes is because again he had suspensions carried over from previous season, which I don't think will surprise anybody. He's a key part to what Sevilla are doing, and I actually think as much as Sevilla probably would like to phase his time at the club out, I think he's the kind of guy that's going to stick around, impress the coaching staff, and earn minutes. So yeah, I think he can really still have a role there, and who knows if that'll be good enough to make it into Argentina squads. With Vasquez, on the other hand, I think the talent Sevilla brought in over the summer, it's really going to be detrimental to him. He's going to be one of the players, I think, who loses out by players like Ocampos coming in.
I'm always going to represent Mudo Vasquez as he started out at
Someone
Barrio.
has to. Someone has to if he does it himself.
Well, purely out of, well, not nepotism, but my Cordoba bias, because he started out at Barrio Parque Capital, which my girlfriend always likes to remind me that that's exactly the same club that she would used to go and play football when she was a youngster. So she's always got a lot of time for Vasquez, but I don't think he's going to get anywhere near the national team, unfortunately. Banega as well he's been one of my favourite players over the last decade. It's always been such a shame that he's never really dominated for the national team and never really kind of taken that midfield by the scruff of the neck, because they've really lacked a player like him, and it's sort of dogged by inconsistencies. When he's been at his best especially for Sevilla in a couple of the spells, he's been absolutely, he's one of the best players to watch, I think, just when he's really purring in the centre of midfield there. But I think it's probably time for the national team to move on from him, especially as we've seen in the recent friendlies, midfield's actually looking surprisingly like quite a strong position with Lo Celso, Paredes, De Paul, Ezequiel Palacios coming through as well. So Banega, love the guy, and he should just stay in the amazing city that is Seville and just enjoy his football there, I think.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair enough. I mean, there was a time not too long ago when we were discussing the midfield and no one had really come through, where you could have still made an argument, I think, to say nobody's really shown themselves to be an upgrade on Banega. But as you say, I think in the recent months, the recent friendlies, certainly Copa America onwards, I think we've seen enough now to suggest it's worth going with that younger generation. Another club that we probably should mention, when Sampaoli was at Seville, we saw a number of Argentinian players go there. And now we're looking at Espanyol bringing in a number of Argentinians. We saw in this window, Matias Vargas arrived, Chucky Ferreira, and Jonathan Caleri. What are your expectations, not just of those players, but of Espanyol, Euan?
Yeah, Espanyol have had a quite disappointing start to the season domestically, but you have to remember with that's partly because they were involved in Europa League qualifying. They had to go through 3 qualifying rounds, and their season basically started in July. So the players who came in, they really had to come in and start playing almost from the off. And Vargas was one of the ones who was able to fit in straight away. He scored an absolutely stunning goal in qualifying. You probably saw, I think that was in the second round against Lucerne. And I think that was his debut as well. And at that point, you're really thinking, okay, he can come in here, he can really make an impact. Since then, he maybe hasn't played quite as well, but the team as a whole hasn't played as well. The Thursday night commitments have really hit this squad hard because they have quite a small squad. So lots of opportunities for these players that have come in, because even though they're all, to be honest, a lot of them are competing with each other for minutes because they all play in similar attacking roles. But I think there'll be enough minutes to go around because Espanyol did make it to the group stages. They're going to be playing every Thursday night. They're going to have games at the weekend as well. And I think after the next international break, I think it'll come really good for Espanyol because they'll have time to breathe, to relax, to get their focus going, and to get used to the fact that they're going to have to play every 3 or 4 days. So, yeah, busy season ahead for these guys, and we're going to see lots of them.
Yeah, we've mentioned Vargas a few times on recent podcasts, and he's one of those names rumoured to be included in the upcoming Lionel Scaloni squad, which may even be named before I get this up, depending on when Scaloni announces that. Are you excited to see what Vargas can do in Europe, Tom?
Yeah, definitely. That was one of the transfers I was most excited about over the summer, and he's a great player to watch. He's as Euan said there, he's already shown a couple of times that little cut onto his right and bend into the top corner, and I think the Espanyol fans should get used to seeing a bit more of that when he's settled and maybe the team's playing a bit better around him. But yeah, he's a lovely player to watch. Great dribbling, great vision, nice cross on him as well, and he contributes with goals. I'm interested to see how Ferreira and Caleri do, because I mean, Ferreira was great at Banfield and Vélez. Went off to Shakhtar, went a bit off the radar, had a terrible time at Newcastle, like genuinely disastrous, but seemed to have, revived his career back in Ukraine and has done well for the last couple of years. But it doesn't, sort of since moving away from Shakhtar, hasn't really cut it. And I don't know, I feel like if this season doesn't go well, a return to Argentina could be on the cards pretty soon for him, because he'll be good in Argentina, maybe not quite cut out for really dominating it in Europe, and potentially I think maybe Caleri might stick around for a little bit longer. He's already turning into a bit of a journeyman, the Deportivo Maldonado legend. And he's got about, I think he's averaged 9 goals a season for Las Palmas and Alaves, so I'm guessing he'll probably get another 9 this season. That's my prediction this year.
Yeah, I mean, what are your expectations of them? Do you think the pair could score the goals that Espanyol are looking for?
To be honest, I don't think they'll play that much as a pair. Just the way that Espanyol have been playing so far, they tend to only have used one of them. Part of that, to be honest, has to do with the fact that Caleri arrived really late on in the transfer window, and the fact that Ferreira got injured almost at the same time. So we've not actually had much time when they've both been available. So it will be interesting to see once Ferreira comes back from injury in the next couple of weeks how they approach that, if they can use the two of them together. But yeah, Ferreira started quite well. He played a really big role in Europa League qualifying, was really important for them in getting them to the group stages. But as I said, he got that injury just a couple of weeks ago, a bit longer actually, at the start of September, and obviously hasn't been playing since. So yeah, maybe once they're both available, they'll both be used up front. But then you've also got some players at Espanyol like Wu Lei, who's the Chinese striker who they have really high hope for, and other players, Javi Puerto from the youth team that they want to give minutes to, Victor Campuzano as well from the youth team. They have a lot of centre forwards there, so they might have to work as a pairing. But if they don't, it's going to be competition between the two of them for minutes, I think.
Yeah, I mean, as Tom said, I think the transfers of recent times, they just need to find somewhere where they settle, really. I mean, Ferreira, that move to Benfica didn't work out for him. Caleri's not really found a home ever since making that ill-advised Maldonado transfer, so he's just been bouncing around. So it would be nice to see the two of them, or at least one of them, find a home in Spain and prove their worth. Someone who certainly has proved their worth in Spain, and who we have to mention in this podcast, is Jimmy. Ezequiel Avila may fall into a category that we spoke about on a previous pod in terms of players that are perhaps better known outside Argentina, due to the fact that San Lorenzo didn't actually get to see a great deal of him before his loan the last couple of seasons. But some of his amazing goals that he scored have made him something of a cult figure before relatively cheap, or very cheap, transfer to Osasuna this summer. I mean, how much of a bargain did you see that as, Euan?
It could be a big bargain, and he's the player that only scores stunning goals. He only deals in golazzos, but part of the problem is that you can't score in the top corner every single week, and he can do the amazing stuff that some players will never do in their entire career. But some of the little things, some of the bread and butter stuff, he just doesn't do, which is probably why he was signed for the price he was. Part of the reason was he was at Huesca last year. They were pretty bad all year, got automatically were one of the relegation favourites, went down in the end of the season, and he scored 10 goals, probably 8 of them were in the top corner. The other 2 might have been penalties. He was a big part in them almost staying up, but they went down, they had to offload him. He went to another team that'll be maybe in that relegation mix, and he's going to be fun, he's going to be great to watch, but he just needs to start doing the little things. He can score great goals. He's already got 1 brilliant goal so far this season, but you'd like to see him be more of a presence in the penalty area. But again, maybe that's just not his game, but he's certainly made a name for himself in Spain.
Yeah, I mean,
with his love of golazzos, maybe he should be the patron saint of this podcast, Peter.
Well, I mean, if he is listening, then feel free to get in touch, and I'm sure we can work something out. But Tom, I mean, you must have been, at the very least, everyone's seen some of his goals. They've been absolutely breathtaking. But I mean, do you think he could be someone that could even force his way into the national team picture?
No, I think he's a bit of a cult hero there. He definitely caught my eye in terms of someone who, I knew a little bit about, but hadn't really seen much of in Argentina, and then was popping up with these really gifable moments all the time. So yeah, he was someone who sort of burst onto my consciousness, and potentially could be someone who kicks on and starts getting a few mentions for the national team. But realistically, there's so many other players ahead of him in the pecking order that I genuinely can't see him ever getting in there, unfortunately. Sorry to burst his bubble. If he is listening, sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry,
right.
Jimmy.
You've just blown that any chance of us
Damn.
getting that deal, but never mind. We'll swiftly move on.
Soz, mate.
Another player that we did mention, though, who potentially could work his way in, not in the immediate future perhaps, is Santiago Cáceres. I know he's obviously suffered from injury since moving to Villarreal, but from what you saw of him, Euan, before injury or since coming back from injury, have you been impressed by Cáceres?
Yeah, before he suffered that injury, he was a bit of a revelation there. Everybody was talking about him because he sort of came in at a time when Villarreal were, as a whole, were really struggling. They'd lost a lot of players in that position and hadn't really signed anybody, but they got him. No one had really heard of him, and he came in, and yeah, he impressed immediately. Everybody was talking about him, and then his injury issues have just been quite devastating for him, to be honest. And since then, Villarreal have gone out and bought in a lot of players, to be honest, in his position. So it's going to be hard for him to work his way back into the mix at Villarreal because, before the injury, he was a guaranteed starter, and now it's certainly not the case. They have a system now that's working. They have players in that position that are some of the first names on the team sheet, and it's going to be difficult for him.
Yeah, I had high hopes for him. Another of the guys who's come through at Vélez, done really well initially, but already these injuries are starting to worry me because I genuinely thought he could be someone who would slot in at the base of midfield for Argentina in a few years' time, but it looks like he might even kind of go the way of Kalanovic and Ascasiva for these really great defensive midfield hopes that we had, and sort of tail off, not through any fault of his own, just through a bit of bad luck and the way that it's fallen for him at the moment. Another player that I'm quite interested to get your take on at Villarreal there as well is someone who's had tons of injuries as well, is Leo Suarez, because he seemed to he left Boca absolutely ages ago, but was really impressive, and I was a bit surprised to see him still there at the Villarreal squad. He sort of had a couple of decent loans, but do you reckon he might get any game time at all?
He certainly hasn't so far this season. He went on loan twice last year. He went on loan at the start of the year. He went to Real Valladolid, and he had a few good games there, but again, injury just hit him at the wrong time, and other players came in, played well, and he didn't get a look back in the team. So in January, he went back out on loan, this time to the second division in Spain, to Real Mallorca, and he was really good there. He played quite often in the second half of the season as they embarked on this promotion run, got to the playoffs and came through the playoffs. So he was recalled by Villarreal in the summer. He's still there, but he hasn't played yet this season, and it's not because of injury. So that's got to be disappointing for him because he's there. He's not really getting a look in.
Yeah, certainly the step up from the huge number of talented youngsters, either in Argentina or who make the move abroad, and then stepping up to becoming fully fledged internationals there's a huge drop off in those numbers. But one of those players that at the moment falls into that bracket, but Ronnie sent in a question just asking what we make of Jonathan Silva, whether he might come into national team consideration. You've probably seen a lot of Silva, and certainly it does play in a position where Argentina over recent years have been lacking, although they seem to have found a fairly settled left back now. What's been your impression of Silva?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of him. He plays at Leganés, which is just in the south of Madrid, and I'm based in Madrid, so I go to as many of their games as I can. And he was just amazing last season. he not only was he the sort of leader of the team in many senses, but the number of assists he came up. I think he almost reached double figures in assists by the end of the season. He scored a few goals as well. One thing to point out is that the position is a quite unique position because Leganés play with a back three, and he was playing as a sort of left wing back, which I don't know, it doesn't always translate so well. Someone who's good in that position to go into play in the back four at a more orthodox left back role. So I don't know how that would work, but yeah, Leganés, he's been absolutely fantastic. And yeah, I just love everything about him because defensively he's so solid, and in attack his crossing, his precise passes as well. It's not just your typical fullback that gets crosses in and someone produces a marvelous header. He can play your sort of defense splitting, picking the pass through several players as well to get the ball into the box. He gets the ball into the attackers whatever way he can, and yeah, I love everything about him.
Oh, that's really interesting to know because I definitely dropped off. I think most people in Argentina's radar a little bit when he moved back to Europe, but that is very promising to
Yeah,
hear because he was so.
for him to be at a club like Leganés, I mean, Leganés are one of the very smallest teams in La Liga, so it certainly was a step down for him to go there because yeah, they don't have the profile. No one's really watching their games, but yeah, he couldn't have done a better job at this lower level.
Yeah, especially the fact that you're sort of commenting there on his defensive solidity, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Peter, but certainly his time at Estudiantes and Boca, he was seen more of a kind of flying forward option who maybe neglected his defensive duties somewhat. So, like you said, maybe the fact that he's got that system that works for him really well, which I think Argentina are pretty stuck to a back four these days, but it's definitely promising because he was definitely, of all the sort of young left back talents to come out of Argentina in the last 5 years or so, he was someone I had really high hopes for and kind of had maybe thought that his moment had passed, but given the lack of options there, I mean, I don't think there's too many other people really making a challenge to be Tagliafico's backup. So, yeah, who knows? Potentially there could be a route back for him into the national team. What do you think, Peter?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we've said a number of times how Tagliafico now has nailed down the position, but there isn't really at the moment players ready to compete with him. As you point out, I think at the time when he was at Estudiantes at such a young age, he was one of those players that, once again, in so many positions we've seen those types where people have watched them and said, "Oh, great, okay, this guy could be Argentina's left back or fill in the gap, goalkeeper, right back for the next 10 years." And he never really pushed on. And by the time when he came back to Boca for that spell, I think people then had started to go cold on him a bit and think, you know what, I don't think he's ever going to be the player we thought he was. So very promising to hear that post that move where it was one of those moves where you sort of thought, okay, I'm not sure where his career goes now, whether it ends up with him just back in Argentina at not one of the biggest clubs, but for him to have gone back across to Europe and really kicked on is hugely encouraging, and it could, well, as long as Argentina are paying attention, earn him a recall at some point. You would have thought, given the lack of options. Jagtar Dinsa sent in a question a couple of weeks ago that was a bit late, so we didn't get it in. But he was asking about the impact the economic problems in Argentina obviously causes a lot of clubs to be snapping up talents. But he was wondering if we could foresee any possibilities of clubs setting up actually having feeder clubs in Argentina. Essentially, he said, like, for example, could Spurs have Newell's as a feeder club? Tom, what do you reckon about that?
I mean, yeah, I think given the the historical nature of and how big some of the clubs are, I don't think they'd ever see themselves as official feeder clubs like you've had with, I don't know, sort of certain European clubs having, I don't know, a small Belgian side or something like that where they can just farm their players off on loan. I think given also the work permit implications as well, I think that complicates things. But certainly you could see maybe some clubs establishing links with some of South America's bigger clubs. Certainly Barcelona and Boca have had deals and agreements in the past. Certainly when Also, Juventus as well, part of the Tevez deal. They had first refusal on a couple of players, and we saw Bentancur move to Juve for a sort of a fairly cut price deal as a result of that. So I definitely think maybe some of the bigger clubs might look to sort of facilitate moves to Europe for some of their players where they know that it's going to be a good route in, but in terms of feeder clubs, I'm not sure I can quite see that. I don't know, again, how the logistics of it all would work, but maybe more partnerships than feeder clubs. Let's go with that.
Yeah, I think you're already right. I don't think supporters would take too kindly to that, less so Spurs or any English club. Yeah, I don't think we'll see it in any official capacity, put it that way. We'll finish up with just a quick take then on some of our favourite Argentinian players to have played in La Liga. I mean, Ronnie Mazumda sent in a point to say that obviously Messi, but after that, then he would have gone with Aimar at Valencia, Riquelme with Villarreal. I imagine Riquelme, speaking personally as well, is probably a pretty popular choice. But I'll come to you first, Euan, whether anyone sticks out.
Yeah, I mean, Riquelme is probably the easy answer, so I'll not go for that. I'll go for something a little bit more interesting. One of the players I'll go for is Javier Mascherano, and it's probably quite interesting because everyone who's seen him for the Argentine national team saw a different Mascherano from what we saw in La Liga, because he arrived as the defensive midfielder that he was for his country, but at Barcelona with Guardiola, he was converted into a centre back and became one of the really, really good ones. And until he left Barcelona, which, to be fair, he actually left in pretty bad circumstances, leaving them a little bit short there. But he formed that partnership with Gerard Piqué that was just absolutely incredible. I mean, Mascherano was a small player, really small, but he just made up for it in, the size of, well, his balls. So he just became one of the best centre backs in Spain, considering he'd never considered that at all. So he's one of the players that I just absolutely loved, not just his character and his leadership and everything he brought, but I always love players that midway through their career can completely change position and put in the effort and are able to do that. So Mascherano is one of the ones who I think is an underrated Argentine legend of La Liga. And then another one, I saw we had a comment earlier from Ronnie Mazumder about the Mallorca when they had three Argentine goalkeepers, and I was like, I kind of remember that. I knew one of them was Leo Franco, but I looked up to see who the other ones were, and one of them was Herman Burgos, of course, and Carlos Roa. And Herman Burgos already mentioned how much I loved what he does with Atletico as a coach, but I loved him as a player as well. I mean, when he used to wear that red baseball cap during games, even at night time when there was no sunlight or any possible reason for it, he looked like a guy that was going to sell you a hot dog, not save a goal. And then he saved a Luis Figo penalty in the face, and the blood sort of just meshed together with a red baseball cap and everything. He was just a character, and still is. I mean, he's one of my favourite people in football. Just some of the stories, just coming up with playing in a rock band that the name of the band is Garb, which is his initials. He got kicked out of the Vatican for telling a dirty joke. He's the best guy in football by an absolute mile, and he was a great player, an underrated player, and they were a great coach. So those are two quite different guys, but two guys who have stood out for me in the sort of 21st century of La Liga.
It's interesting that you mentioned Mascherano. With that aspect of being converted to a central defender, I think it's something which a huge number of people watching the Argentinian national team, with a shortage of central defenders, were questioning why on earth we never really saw Mascherano used in that position for the national team. Instead, always keeping him as the number 5. So it's interesting that you would mention him in that light. Tom, what did you want to add?
Yeah, I was going to say, talking of Mallorca as well, I always had a soft spot for Ariel Ibagasa as well. I don't know why. I think it's probably something, a lot of it had to do with maybe some football manager careers back in the past. But, he was a lovely little attacking midfielder, really good spells at Mallorca, time at Atletico Madrid and Villarreal as well. And I think he's a bit of a underrated sort of cult hero as well for Argentinians who played in Spain, especially ones who didn't necessarily make a huge impact at the national team level. Obviously, Riquelme and Aimar, Ronnie's read our minds there, because I think they're two of the ones that most people's thoughts go to. So Ronnie obviously knows his onions there, but even the likes of Kili Gonzalez and Roberto Ayala at Valencia always bring back good memories. But I think probably my favourite, other than those, is maybe a fairly obvious option, but Sergio Aguero at Atletico Madrid. That's where I kind of fell in love with him. He was just such a perfect striker, and coming across and maybe having a year to adapt, but after that just killing it year on year, and seeing him for the under-20s as well, just dominating for them and scoring some amazing goals. That's where I kind of I liked him at Independiente, but just the way he just took to European football and followed in that great line of strikers at Atletico Madrid, and he's obviously gone on just to consistently be one of the best strikers in the Premier League as well. I've got he might be more of a Premier League legend these days, but Aguero at Atletico Madrid was probably my favourite iteration of him, I think.
Yeah, I'd be interested to quickly get your opinion on Aguero, Euan, given his Atletico time.
Yeah, I mean, he was there for a good half a decade, scored, I think, over 100 goals. He was there for a long time. Really was one of the main, along with Forlan, one of the main players that got Atletico back on their feet, back into Champions League. But they don't like him at all at Atletico now. At the new stadium they have outside, they have a row of plaques for all the legends, but the definition of legend is anyone who played 100 matches or more for the club. So Aguero has one, and before most matches you'll see it covered in beer, covered in dirt, covered in yogurt, yogurt lids. So like people just throw whatever crap they have in their pockets on that plaque, the same way they do with other players who maybe moved to Real Madrid, like Courtois, or what they've done recently with Griezmann. The way he left to go to Manchester City was not appreciated at all at Atletico Madrid, and it's a shame because he did so much for them, but he kind of ruined that entire legacy by flirting with other clubs in Spain, and then eventually going to Manchester City and sort of just forcing his way out of the club. So it's a shame, but because on the pitch he was fantastic.
Cannot not mention Redondo in this conversation. Certainly for me, Redondo and Riquelme, the two midfield players that I could just watch videos of on loops for hours. Just such elegance with the ball, and certainly with that Real Madrid team, which was not short of superstars, but Redondo still managed to stand out when he was on the pitch. So he would certainly be up there for me with all those players that we did mention already. So, well, we've gone over the hour mark, so we'll probably call it there. But just want to say a huge thanks once again to Euan. I'll put the links to Euan's Twitter and his books that I mentioned in his introduction. But thanks again for coming on, Euan.
No problem. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to talk about players past and present from Argentina. There's some good names we went through.
Yes, indeed. I'm sure we'll have a few comments saying that we should have mentioned someone else, but time, of course, was getting on. So thanks again, as always, Tom, as well. And I'm sure we'll do this again soon. I'll also put your Twitter in the information below.
Cheers, mate. Always appreciate it. And for all those people who are upset about maybe not enough time being given to Leandro Chichizola or Facundo Roncaglia, then we apologise. But I'm sure we can do some pods in the future to catch up on how they're doing as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure how popular they'll be, but we can. If you let us know that's what you want us to do, then we will get round to it. But thanks very much for listening. Do feel free to share or like, or whatever it is you can do to spread the word, and we'll hopefully be back very soon with another episode. Thank you.